RNMD is a show about hospital relationships from the perspective of doctors and nurses. You're very smart, and we know that you would never come to a podcast for medical advice. So obviously, call your non-podcasting doctor and nurse team if you need any medical care. Oh, and we should also mention that we don't represent any hospital at all, ever. Okay, start the thing. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of RNMD. I'm your nurse host, Abby, and today I had the pleasure of speaking with Dr. Jim Fulmer. You probably know Dr. Jim Fulmer from his IG handle, Dr. Wars Game. He makes all those funny cartoons that everybody always passes around. He has such an extensive history with nursing, working with so many different types of nurses, and he's really a big advocate for nursing. It's one of the reasons why I asked him to come on the show, and I got the impression from him one of the reasons why he wanted to do it was because he wants to change the culture and the sort of discrepancy and roadblocks that we have between doctors and nurses. He's worked with midwives, he's worked with research nurses, he's worked in public health, outpatient, he currently works as a hospitalist, so he really gets to see the different dynamics. And it's so interesting to hear his point of view as an experienced attending. Also, he's an extremely creative person, obviously his drawings, but beyond that, he gets into the history of why he started his Instagram account. It actually was because of the board game that he started, and it sort of took off from there. His board game is available at drwars.com, or it's also available on Amazon. You can just search Dr. Wars Game, and it comes up in the search. I'm so appreciative and grateful for Dr. Fulmer for coming on the show and trying to really empower nurses and advance nurses. And he's just such an interesting guy, and we could have talked for 3 or 4 hours. So I hope he comes back on because we need to dive in to this really fascinating career that he's had. So I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Here we go. First of all, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I'm so excited for having you here. I wanted to talk to you for a really long time. I am obsessed with your cartoons. They're so funny. So thank you.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Happy to do it.
So when we started talking about doing this interview, I was really surprised by your background. You have such a extensive background in medicine in general and with nurses. So that was one of the reasons why I really wanted to get you on and we needed to interview you. So I guess just give us like an overview first of how you got started in medicine and your background.
Well, yeah, it has been a pretty long career and it's been really interesting. I've been really lucky to be in a lot of different situations. So when I was in college, I was pre-med, but I was also really interested in entertainment. I was in plays. I did some comedy stuff. I was going to go to medical school, and then I thought maybe I should try entertainment. So after college, I couldn't decide. So I didn't really apply, and I took a job in Appalachia in a place called the Frontier Nursing Service, which is unbelievably the first thing I did when out of college. It was basically work with a whole bunch of nurses. So I became, a nurse. I learned all about the nursing life right from the beginning. And you should Google Frontier Nursing Service. People that are listening should Google it because if you don't know what to do right now and you're in college, it'd be a really cool place to go to volunteer. This is a long time ago, so I don't know if they still do that, but I was a volunteer and I worked in the health education department. And this place teaches nurse midwives. They start out in horseback to go up into the mountains. So
Wow.
nurse midwives would go up the outback and do prenatal care and even deliveries up in the mountains because nobody else, you can't get in there any other way. They don't do that anymore. Now they go up there by jeep. But, they call them hollers. I don't know if you've ever heard that term. But you go up in the hollers and there's the place in the Appalachians are so obscure And so out of it, the only way you can get there at that point was horseback. And now they go up by jeep, but it's still out of the way. So it became this bigger and bigger service. It was just first a nurse midwifery service, then it's a hospital. Now it's one of the bigger training grounds for nurse midwives and family nurse practitioners and nurses. And it's in Hyden, Kentucky. At the time I was there, Hyden was only 500 population. I don't know how big it is now. I haven't checked, but it was a really cool place. I lived with the nurses. We're basically in a dorm situation. There was a lot, I learned vegetarianism there. At that time, they didn't call them vegan. They called it vegetarianism. I learned how to meditate there. It was a really cool place.
Wow.
So that was where I started. And then I did that for a year. It started paying me. I actually won a Kentucky State Hospital Radio Award for radio spots. So I was able to learn a lot about nursing, but also that you could do entertainment and medicine at the same time. So I started thinking, well, maybe I could do both. Maybe I could do entertainment and medicine. So then I got more serious about medicine, and I went to the next thing. That's when I moved to New York, and I worked for Mount Sinai asbestos research program. So that's where I met a lot of research nurses. So I first met, nurse midwives and family nurse practitioners, learned that. And then I learned research nurses because I was in Mount Sinai. And we went out to we basically did work interviews. So we would go out and do a lot of details, every exquisite detail about somebody's work to find out if they were exposed to asbestos. Because the research program it was in asbestos. I worked with a guy who actually discovered asbestosis. So that was really cool. That's like the guy who actually did all the research to discover asbestosis. I was able to work with him and work with his team. So I learned about research. I learned about research nursing. And I did that for 2 years. And I took some courses, finished sort of the pre-med that I hadn't finished in college. And, I was lucky enough to get into med school. And I did med school. And then, I don't want to keep rambling on here, but but there, I've had so many different ways to learn about nursing. It's fun and really entertaining to me about looking back on my career. But so like in med school, I had a really liberal, I don't want to say liberal, it's got a political meaning, which I don't mean, that the person in med school and my residency was interested in doing other types of things outside your usual institutional. So in med school, I went to, they allowed me to do my family practice rotation in an Eskimo village in Alaska named Kotzebue. So I worked in the ER, and I was with all these Eskimo nurses. So I learned about the Eskimo nursing, how they looked at nursing, how that culture is. That was really exciting.
That's pretty cool. Okay, wait. So what's the difference? Because you just mentioned 3 very different places. You're up in the mountains in Kentucky, you're in Manhattan, and then you're also in Alaska with the Eskimos. So what's the biggest difference between those styles, those types of medicine, those types of nurses?
Oh, wow. I mean, all nurses are still nurses, no matter where you are. It's just the Eskimo nurses were nurses, but they're Eskimos. So they have the Eskimo culture behind them. And there's a different type of nursing. And the nurse midwives that I worked with in the Appalachian Mountains were way more holistic and way more, I would say, independent. Mm-hmm. First of all, they're nurse practitioners and nurse midwives, so you have to be independent. So I learned from the very beginning that you can be a nurse and be super independent and have doctors sort of go in and out and you do your job. And that was the difference, in Appalachia. Mm-hmm. It's a little more the independence of the nurses. And in Eskimos, the Eskimo village, they weren't really independent as much, but it was a different culture. And you had to have the Eskimo nurses be there because Eskimos were coming in and they understood the culture. So there's a lot of people like me that go in there to volunteer. I was there at the Indian Health Service. And so you have to have people that understand the culture in order to, it's like if somebody from Vietnam comes to one of your hospitals and they don't speak English, you don't understand their culture. It's a whole, you have to understand their culture. So the nurses were really important for that kind of thing. And then I mean, then the other thing I was able to do is when I was a resident, my residency director in primary care and internal medicine was super. I loved him. He was one of my role models. He loved overseas training, so we arranged for me to go to Australia, and I was in Sydney. And one of the most exciting things I did was fly with a flying doctor service there, and so I got to go to all these outback places and kind of learn about what nurses do in the outback. And I flew with different specialties every day. I go with a dermatologist one day, then I go with a pulmonologist, and then with a nephrologist. And then we would go to see one patient after the other. And then the nurses would take over in the afternoon because they basically ran the clinic. So that's another independent thing. And it's also a cultural thing because they're taking care of Aborigines. And there's nobody in the outback there. There's maybe 30 people in the town. You're going there to take care of 30 to 100 people.
Right. Oh my gosh. That's so interesting. You've had such a unique experience. Oh my gosh. I can't even imagine. Just to go back to the midwives for 1 second. So what was your role when you're with the midwives? What was your role in that? What would you do?
I was hired as a volunteer to work in the health education department. So part of that was understanding what the health issues were in the community of Appalachia and what the FNS health providers did when they went there. So I followed them up to the hollers, private people's houses, and watched what they did. I followed a physical therapist. I followed a respiratory therapist to the houses, and houses is being generous. They're places that they lived, and I followed nurses. And so, like for example, I went into one house. There's a couple health issues that was interesting. Well, I went to one house where they literally had a pan and a huge block of lard that big. It's like, if you're not watching, it's like maybe the size of an iPad in a block. And it was in a pan, and that was how they created that. They melted the lard down and then put the meat in it.
Wow.
So we're like trying to explain that maybe all that fat's not so good for you. And then, I went with a physical therapist, and there was just somebody who really loved the physical therapist. And so I realized how, not just doctors are revered by some of these people. They love the health people, the providers.
Did the providers that were there, did they live in that area?
Yes, we all lived in kind of a dorm situation, and we all lived together. The doctors and the nurses.
So it wasn't temporary lodging that you were at. It was like a permanent for.
Well, for me, it was room and board, and it wasn't a very big place. So I don't know if it's the same way now, but when I was there, the volunteers were room and board. The nurses were paid, just a basic salary. I don't even know how much. And the doctors, but we all lived in the same area.
Okay.
And that's not temporary.
Yeah.
So it's a dorm that's set up for that.
I see. Yeah. I was wondering if the nurses, if they're in the same community as their patients, if they know, if it's a small community.
Oh, I see what you mean. I would say not really, no. Because they're in training, and they're kind of like trying to, live close to the hospital so they can do what they need to do in the hospital.
I see.
It's not really a dorm like you think of when you think of a dorm in a school. It's more of a house.
I see. Yeah.
With rooms, a lot of rooms.
I mean, that's pretty cool. Going up there, so you were a student. You were a med student at the time?
No, this was pre-med. I had I went after college. I did 3 years before I went to medical school because I was trying to decide whether to do entertainment or not. And, I just didn't. I went to medical school, because I thought I could do both. It would be not easier, but it would be better to be in medical school and do entertainment on the side than try to, it's hard to be an entertainer and be a doctor or some sort of medical person. So I thought I could probably do both. And that helped me understand that you could do both because I did some entertainment there, and I've been able to do entertainment my whole career.
So you obviously do Dr. War games, which everyone loves, and you draw and you create all of this. What else do you do? You're saying entertainer.
Well, I don't, over the years, I mean, when I was a resident and when I was med school, I would do spoof videos making fun of what we did. We did that every year of my med school and residency. In the days that when I was in med school, which was a while ago, it wasn't that easy. We had to do like videotapes and it wasn't like, it wasn't
Right.
digital, but I worked with, a CBS guy and we made some really, just some funny videos to entertain ourselves. I've done that. I've done cartoons all my life but nothing like I'm doing now with the Instagram. That's a pretty productive thing where I'm doing it every other day.
Mm-hmm. Right. And then, so you mentioned you went to Manhattan and you were doing research with asbestos there, and you were obviously working with research nurses there too. I mean, is there a difference in working with like a bedside nurse or a research nurse? I mean,
Oh
yeah.
yeah. There's a big difference. I mean, there's a huge difference, and I'm doing research now. I do a lot of
Mm-hmm.
research, and I work with a lot of research nurses. So the really cool thing about research is it's another thing where the nurses can be a little bit more independent. You don't have to deal with a lot of the, you know, I guess the best way to say it is scut work of a
Mm-hmm.
nurse, and that you do in the
Mm-hmm.
hospital. Nurses have to do a lot of stuff that is kind of, like paperwork. There's a lot of stuff there. I think they have so much on their plate in the hospital. In research, you're only focused on the study that you're doing. So you know that study. The patients want to be there. They get paid to be there for the most
Mm-hmm.
part. So it's a difference in how you interact with patients because because the patients want to be there and they know what they're into, and the nurses only do one thing.
Right. Right.
Compared to, you're going, how I don't have to tell anybody
Yeah.
that's listening what a hospital nurse
Yeah.
does.
Flying all over the place, basically.
Exactly.
Yeah. Is there anything that you wish nurses knew more about your role or your job? I mean, you're a hospitalist. You work with just about everybody in the hospital. I mean, you work with every nurse, right? I mean, is there anything you wish
I do.
that we knew?
I think, I can speak really for the place that I'm in. I really think the nurses and the hospitalists are very collaborative. I think they know what we do. I mean, maybe they don't know the schedule that we were at. They don't know necessarily when I'm on call, when I'm not. We have a big group. I think it's going to vary from one hospital to the next. So
Definitely.
where I am, I don't really think that's a factor.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. It sounds like you guys have a good team.
We have a great team. I really, I've been there for a long time and I stay there because I really like the hospitalist team. I love the nurses. I just think it's a great environment.
Yeah, that's awesome. So let me ask you, tell me what the negative for you is working like in the hospital versus working research or public health, for example. Give me your pros and cons.
Oh man. Well, I like what I'm doing now. I mean, I like hospital work. Are you talking about me or for nursing?
For you.
For me, for a doctor, I
Yeah,
mean,
like what do you
doctor
Yeah,
wise,
doctor wise. Yeah. Cuz I want I want to shed light on, nursing, but I think there's a discrepancy on our end too. Like we don't really know. We just sometimes it just feels like the doctor, and it's hard to attach.
we need to start breaking that
Yeah.
down. That's why I like your idea of this podcast.
Thank you.
Nurses and doctors really have to be more and more collaborative. I mean, it has to be a team. And I just, this whole thing with the doctors on the pedestal, that's already being somewhat
Mhm.
decreased, but it has to be viewed by us and by the public as a collaborative team effort and that everybody has their role. There's no role that's better than the other role. And that's not just the nurses, it's respiratory therapists and all the ancillary people. And even ancillary may not be a term we should
Right.
use. That kind of implies that they're
Yeah.
secondary, and they're
Right.
not. Every person has a role in the hospital, and I love that about hospital work.
Yeah.
It's just I think we have to it's a very collaborative field at this point.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I'm so glad you said that because the idea of this was, doctors and nurses in general, but it's not just that. I mean, it's so much more than that. Like you're saying, respiratory therapists. I mean, they did so much during COVID. And then I had some respiratory therapists writing to me saying, we tried to go get our free Starbucks for frontline workers, and they're not recognizing respiratory therapists as,
Yeah,
you know, I mean,
uh,
when these people are the ones bailing me out, right?
yeah, that really irritated me when I heard about that.
Yeah.
And I mean, the dietitians, social workers. I mean, it's like you have to have these people.
Definitely.
Pharmacists. I'm not trying to leave anybody out, but
Yeah.
every person in the hospital is important.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think it is changing though. I mean, the culture, it does seem like there's been a shift. I mean, since the beginning of your career, I mean, it has it changed? Have you seen a movement?
I have. I've seen it become more collaborative. When I first started, that was a long time ago. It was more of a separation between doctors and nurses.
Yeah,
It's becoming less, but there's still a separation.
definitely.
There's still a respect. I want everybody to respect, not just. I mean, there's still a respect factor for the doctors, and I think maybe a little less so for the nurses. And I don't think that's the way we need to go. We need to have the same amount of respect for all people in the hospital.
Yeah, definitely. You mentioned to me before this that you were a leader or are you currently a leader of your hospitalist group?
No, I was a leader of we have 4 hospitals in our place in our city, and I was the leader of my hospitalist group in the largest hospital.
Okay.
So the main hospital, the Catchment Hospital, I was the leader of my hospice group for about 7 or 8 years. And during that time, I was chief of medicine for about 4 years.
I see. Okay.
So I've had a lot of administrative background in addition to being a frontline person. Now I'm just a frontline person. I don't have any administrative responsibilities except I'm still the medical director of a research program.
I see. Okay. So I had a lot of questions about this administrative role that you have because I feel like the administration, as far as where I'm concerned, I mean, I'm very removed from what they're doing and the plans that they're making. And so I was just curious with some of your experience with that. How do you feel like the bedside doctor and the bedside nurse is viewed by administration?
I can only speak for where I work, and or I have certainly other places I've worked. I can reflect on that too. But right now, I mean, our hospital is. I think administration really respects the doctors and nurses, and they do support us. But every place who has administration and frontline, they have different goals. There's nothing wrong with. I mean, everybody in medicine who, if you're on the front lines, likes to make fun of administration. Since I've been in administration, I understand how difficult it is. I was on the front lines and I was an administrator trying to do both. It's very difficult for an administrator to try to help the front lines, look at the bottom line, and try to deal with all these personalities. Very, very difficult. It's much harder than it is being on the front lines. And I'm telling you, the front lines are difficult. We know that. We're in the front lines. But when you're trying to manage a lot of people and a lot of different cultures and a lot of different personalities, you're also trying to make things cost efficient. The hospital has outward pressures that the front line really can't. You're so involved in taking care of patients, you don't know what the hospital pressures are. And I when I was leader of the group, I always advocated for my group, but sometimes I had to tell them things that I didn't want to tell them, but I had to. That I wasn't against things necessarily. It's just that they're different avenues. So they're just different perspectives, and I don't want to say anything bad about administration at all because I think they have a really hard job, and they at least where I work, I know they're doing the best they can for us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Did you ever, like you're saying, you had to tell your team sometimes things that you didn't necessarily want to tell them? What was the reason for, I mean, I don't want to get too specific with your hospital system, but what was the reasons that the things had to be implemented? Was it like patient safety, for example, or was it more because of, like you're saying, these outward financial pressures?
Well, patient safety at where I work is always top priority. So, I mean, the patient safety and patient care is always top priority
Hmm.
where I work. So, but you have to do things that, you don't want to do anything that affects that.
Right.
I'll put it that way.
Yeah. Yeah. Did you feel valued in that role? Because it's a lot, like you're saying, it's a lot of different people. It's difficult to navigate all of these different people and these different roles. Did you feel valued?
By who? Yes, I would say yes, but
Yeah.
yeah, I would. I mean, I don't know whether it was my style or whatever. I felt like my style was a collaborative style and a consensus style. Not everybody's like that. There's different types of leaders, and different people respond to different types of leaders.
Hmm.
So I felt like my group respected me. I felt that the administrators respected me. Maybe I'm wrong, but I felt respected. But not everybody liked what I did, but that's true of any.
Of course. Yeah. You can't please everybody, definitely.
That's something that you don't when you're in administration. You can't please everybody,
Right.
and that is one of the hardest things to being an administrator. Is you want to please everybody and you can't. It's impossible.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Oh my gosh. So, okay, so you did outpatient. I'm trying to keep your whole record here linear. It's difficult because you have such a long history here. I'm trying to keep everything together. So, you also did outpatient work. You had your own outpatient
Well,
office
I was in a group. I was in
in
a
a
group
group.
practice, and so I was with I started the group was around 8 or 10 doctors, and it grew to 50, and then I moved into hospitalist work. I
Yeah.
was in there. I did office work, traditional office where you're in the office and then you go see your patients in the hospital. I did
Right.
that for about 8 years.
Wow. Yeah. Did you have nurses in that group?
I had one nurse and one medical assistant.
Okay.
I had three patient rooms and just went one from one to the other.
Yeah. Yeah. I've done
Pretty traditional.
Yeah, I've done that work before. Yeah.
Yeah.
You're like on
I
roller
like
skates.
yeah, I like hospitalist work a lot better. It's just more. There's more people. There's more things, more challenges, more things to do. I like seeing all the specialists. When you're in the office, I love my patients and
Yeah.
I got to know a lot of them, but it was just me, the patient, the nurse, and the medical assistant. And it was very hard to educate yourself,
Right. Right.
keep yourself educated.
Yeah. You feel sort of like closed off, maybe.
Yeah, yeah, it's a little closed. It's hard to even the environment is closed. It's a little tiny section you're in, and you're just going from one room to the next.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So, how long have you been drawing for? So, how long have you been drawing for?
All my life,
And when did you turn it into this?
about 2 years ago.
Oh my gosh. Because you're like the biggest Instagram cartoonist now, at least in my world, at least.
No, there's a lot of other cartoonists.
Okay.
From what there's not that many, but there's some excellent cartoonists who are doctors out there.
Okay.
I think I follow everybody that I know that's a cartoonist, and there's really some really talented cartoonists. I'm not the only one for sure.
Yeah. Maybe you're just my favorite then. Yeah. So I have some questions. Some people sent in a few questions about the cartoon specifically. So, okay, first of all, do your colleagues know about your Instagram fame?
Some of them do. Not my fame. They know I do cartoons.
Okay. They don't know that you're like in this
I'm not really. I wouldn't call myself famous. I just have a cartoon account, and I know a lot of people like to deal with followers. I like to do that, but my main intent is just to entertain, and when I can, educate people. And I just do it because I have fun, and I really it's something I really enjoy drawing cartoons. I really enjoy the community that I'm developing with the followers.
Hmm.
I love the interaction, and I think I'm really glad I started it.
Yeah. How many hours a day do you spend drawing or on Instagram?
Uh, I would, I try to post a cartoon about every other day.
Hmm.
The worst I've had is waiting, 4 days, but mostly it's every other day, sometimes every third. And what I try to do, I have my hospital schedule is such that when I have my time off, I try to stockpile the cartoons so that when I'm working, and my work is, I really can't do much when I'm working.
Right.
So I have it all set up so that I can just post the cartoon with a couple seconds, and then I don't have to draw it on the time I'm working.
Yeah.
But it depends on sometimes a simple cartoon may take me hours and hours. It isn't just drawing it. Drawing it is not that hard for me.
Hmm.
What's harder for me is making it really succinct. That's really hard to do.
Hmm.
I've had to redo a few cartoons, well, actually multiple cartoons, where I put the caption or the little bubble, the comic bubble, and it just not quite concise or funny enough. I got
Hmm.
to change that, and then I got to, a couple of cartoons I've just completely scrapped and redrawn.
Hmm.
But what I try to do is think of an idea in the car on my commute and have it all pictured in my head, so that when I go home, I just draw it. And then I try to think of the cartoon balloon too, but that doesn't always work as well. I get a lot of ideas from people that comment on the cartoons. I get a lot of ideas from direct messages. I get a lot of ideas from working in the hospital. If like I'm working, and like today, I was going from one place to the next, and the patients were not there. I had already drawn a cartoon about that, but it made me think, hey, maybe I could repost this cartoon and just say, hey, this is my day today. I didn't have time to do it.
Right.
Maybe I'll do it after our interview. But it's like, I think of things at the time I'm rounding or in between, and like I have a list of things on my phone that I write my ideas down so I can refer to them later if I don't have anything to do. And some of these series that I've done, like right now I'm doing a Guide to Specialty series. If you post this interview like a month from now, they'll go, what the hell?
Yeah.
What are you talking about?
Yeah.
But you look back and you'll see several cartoons on Guide to Selecting a Specialty. That was just something, I think maybe somebody's said something, and I just kind of said, hey, this is a cool idea to select a specialty, and it goes from there.
So on your phone, on the list for your phone, you'll have like, oh, I'm going to do guide to specialty. So you have like a big list going, or you have a list of the
I have
specialties?
this particular series, I'm going based on just specialties that I know, but also people's requests.
Hmm.
So what I'm doing is, if somebody requests it, I'll write their Instagram profile or address on my list and say, oh, this person requested me to do anesthesiology. And if somebody else requests it, I'll have that. So then I tag them, because I want them to, see the result, the fruits of their
Yeah.
request. I really do respond a lot to individual requests. If you request me to do a cartoon, I'm almost going to do it 100% of the time.
Yeah.
I've rarely not done a cartoon that somebody asked me to do.
Okay. Okay.
It may not be right away.
Yeah. I was going to say, okay. So request, you got to do one for us for the podcast then.
Oh, absolutely. I'll do one.
That would be fun.
The thing about the actual feed is, I just want to make sure it fits in with what I'm doing,
Right. Right. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I have the same problem. I don't really even like posting on my regular feed. My Instagram started, it's a personal account. It didn't start this way. And then in my stories, I started posting more about nursing and, just different interactions I was having with providers, and then somebody would write in and say, oh, me too. And then when COVID happened, that's when people actually noticed my account at all. So then it was like I had this sort of like, what do I do with this now? Because I was just posting a picture of me on a horse 3 weeks ago, and now it's like I feel like I'm in this world. Like, what do I do? So I thought, well, at least I could talk to people and see what they're doing. And, I mean,
Well, this is a brilliant idea you came up with. I really love it.
thank you so
I'm
much.
really I'm looking forward to, listening to all your podcasts.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate it. Okay, so I know the answer, I think, to this one, but hold on. There's one more somebody sent in, one more question. Okay, are you single?
Who's asking? No, just kidding. No, I'm married and I have children. I have
Yeah.
a wonderful wife. I have a great family.
Okay. So the person's out of luck, basically. Yeah.
That's right.
Okay. Do you have any examples of really positive or even really negative experiences that you've had with nursing?
I mean, I've had a lot of positive experiences. I mean, the negative experiences really aren't, I don't even think they're negative. I mean, it's really more learning opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
Sound like an administrator, but
Give me, yeah. Give me some
I mean,
examples.
it's like, well, here's an example of, when I was an intern, I got awakened at 4 a.m. for the nurse to tell me there was a normal potassium. Really?
Right.
But I mean, that's more, I mean, I don't, and at the time I was an intern, and, I was so overwhelmed, you get irritated.
Right.
At this point, I don't get irritated. I really don't get irritated at nurses. I really feel that, whatever, if they have a question, and I'm on a text, a HIPAA text thing. And I know other people that work with me don't like to have that, but I don't mind having any text from nurses at any time, because I feel like even if they think it's a stupid question, first of all, it might not be a stupid question. And if it is, I'll just answer it.
Right.
And it's not a big deal. It's much harder where you're an intern and you're completely sweaty and overwhelmed, and you're learning yourself. That gradually gets better. The more experience you have, I hope this would happen to people as they have a more time, or they're just more perspective and collaborative relationship with nurses.
What's interesting about that is because I do work at a teaching hospital, and I've worked at places that are not. And that's an interesting, I guess I never thought of it that way, because I do see that discrepancy. And I always think to myself, the doctors they've been attendings for 30 years, and they come in and they're relatively pleasant, and they say hi to me, and how are you? And they look me directly in my face, and they're always, I mean, in my experience, really respectful and really responsive. And I've been that nurse that's called about something that was
Right.
fine,
Right.
Like you're saying, the interns, maybe because they're unsure of their practice still, maybe they feel so they're a little more edgy, because I do feel that. And I find that with new nurses as well. A new nurse.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it's not just, there's learning nurses that are learning too.
Exactly.
And then you put those two together, and it's like combustible.
Exactly. Yeah. And they get like their feelings hurt really easily, and then they try to.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. It's just.
And I think that's true, that if you're just new, it is easier to hurt your feelings because you're really not confident yet.
Yeah.
I didn't really feel comfortable taking care of patients till I was almost done with my second year of training, in residency.
Yeah.
When you get out of med school, you're just overwhelmed with trying to pretend like you're a doctor. You are a doctor and you can do things, but you're in training. You're still trying to learn.
Right.
It takes a while before you feel like you're really comfortable. And even after residency, you're starting something new. And you're a fellow, you're starting something new after you're a fellow, and you're just starting, you finish your cardiology fellowship or whatever, and you start a new practice, and you're still new.
Absolutely.
Just to your new career.
Right. Yeah. And even something small like you're on a floor you've never been on, you don't know the codes, you don't know the EMR system, all of that can be very overwhelming too, just in and of itself.
Yeah. And I think for anybody, you just have to sort of try to understand what they're going through and try to give them a little bit of slack. And it's easy to say when you're where I am. I mean, I'm not in training, and I've been doing this for a long time. So I feel like, maybe it's easier for me to say than it is for somebody that doesn't have that right
Yeah.
yet.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I'll have like a first year nurse and they're exasperated. They come up to me and I can't find the doctor and they're so upset. And I'm sort of like, it's okay.
Yeah.
It's a, what's the problem? Like, I can help you with it. They get really flustered very quickly.
Don't you think really we all need to calm down a little
A little
bit?
bit. Yeah. The anxiety.
Everybody's like so anxious about everything, and Instagram doesn't help.
Yes.
Not just Instagram, social media. I mean,
Social
it's just
media.
like and I think part of it's because it's anonymous.
Right.
You can be a real jerk because you're anonymous.
Exactly. How do you deal with that? Because I'm sure you have people who are rude to you on Instagram, just like anyone else.
Best advice I ever heard from somebody is don't engage. That is how I try to do it. And when I've not done that, it's been a mistake.
Right.
So I try not to, if somebody's obviously trying to just annoy and just be a jerk, just don't answer them. And then sometimes when you do answer them and they don't even answer you back, they're not even looking at your account.
They don't even care.
Why did you even bother?
Yeah.
I've spent, if the things that when I've made that mistake, it's way too much time on
Right.
it. It's like I spend all the time like creating this foolproof argument. So for what? Somebody I don't even know. They may be 12 years old.
Yeah.
It's stupid.
It might be a robot. Honestly,
it could be a
they're
robot.
saying these are bots. A lot of them, these anti-COVID people are bots. A lot of them. They said
on my account, I really don't have a lot of that though, so I don't have to deal with it too much.
When you do get it, what kinds of things is it usually about?
I just haven't had that much of it. I mean, there was probably one post I did a long time ago was about vaccines and sort of some of the anti-vaxxers came out. But I really haven't had that many jerky texts coming up. But occasionally here and there. I think maybe I've been lucky and maybe I don't know why. It's just, but I haven't had to deal with it and I'm not going to deal with it if it comes my way.
Yeah. Do you have a fear when you draw something? Do you have it in your mind of things to be careful of or?
No, I just post what I personally think is either funny or thought provoking in a positive way or educational. Those are the three kind of tenets of what I want to do with the comics. It's either most of the time it's just for comic value and entertainment. Right. A lot of it is satire. Some people don't understand the satire.
Right.
So, when I post a satirical comment or a comic, satire is difficult sometimes. Yeah. You have to do it really, really well. And some people don't understand satire.
Definitely.
But, I love satire. I love doing satirical stuff. I love comedy and, to try to make people laugh. That's the main goal. But I also like doing educational cartoons when it's appropriate. Like I've done a couple collaborations which have been educational, which I really enjoyed. So if it's more of the educational stuff comes my way, I'll do that.
That's really good. Yeah. I was talking to someone yesterday. I had the only real time, once in a while, I post questions on my Instagram and it's like quizzes, and heart failure or whatever. And I get my questions from the American Association of Critical Care Nurses. I'm not coming up with these questions. And I'll get people who are, they work at these really prestigious places and they'll message me and well, actually that's wrong, or they'll try to pick apart the question. I'm like, don't blame me. You can blame them for this. Yeah.
I think that's great when you put those up.
But the only time I really got attacked on social media so far was the COVID people, like you're saying, like the anti-vax people came for you. I had like the COVID people come at me a little bit and say I was working for NASA or something. I don't know. I couldn't follow the logic.
Yeah, there's a lot of that. You just, I don't know. That's probably the worst part about social media, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But it's better not to get involved with it if you can help it.
Definitely. Yeah. So your drawings, actually, the first thing that you did was it was a game, right? That's how it came about?
Yeah, that's the reason I started the account because people don't even know I did this game. I have it in my profile, but you know how Instagram is. You're looking at the feed. You're not really looking at your profile much.
Right.
But I made a board game, which I really loved. I sold it out as a strategy game. I really like it. And, there's some improvements I could make, but I really liked it a lot. But I sold it out, and I wanted to do a card game, which is what I'm selling now. And I like the card game. It's a simple game. Takes about an hour to play, about 10 minutes to learn. And, the characters that I drew all the cards. I have there's patient cards, there's doctor cards, there's a nurse card. It's actually called the super nurse, and it's the most powerful card in the pack.
Nice.
Of course.
Nice.
And there's problem cards and cure cards. So I drew everything in the game, and some of the characters that I drew for the game, I carried over. But the whole point of doing my Instagram in the first place was to try to market the card game. But in fact, if you go back to the very beginning and you see what I drew, it's the characters in my cards. And it became rather quickly just about the cartoons, because I so enjoyed doing the cartoons. And then people started, following me, and I kind of went with what people requested, and just got out of hand.
Yeah. I mean, it's really cool.
In a good way.
Yeah. Yeah. So the link is,
but I'm still selling this game.
Yeah.
I mean, this game it's a really cool game. It's kind of like, I don't know. You get points by curing patients. You have to have the right doctor and the right cure in order to cure your patients. And whoever gets the most points, you get points for curing patients. And there's a bunch of things you can do. Like I have a if you don't have the right doctor, you can trade it with somebody. But if you have a not on call card, like you play the not on call card, you can't, I'm sorry, you can't have my doctor thinking you're the neurologist, because he's not on call right now. So you can't trade. And then, I have the super nurse card, which is, you can cure anybody without some of the cure cards that you're supposed to have.
That's pretty funny.
And I have a Grim Reaper card that kills the patient.
Oh my God.
So there's some of these little,
those
little, cards are thrown in to change the course of the game.
This is the humor of someone who works in a hospital, definitely.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of private jokes.
Yeah,
a lot of jokes that if you work in a hospital, you get what I'm doing.
Yeah,
and I based it on actually kind of what happens. I have 8 different types of problems. Like there's the cardiac problems, GI problems, different specialties, and there's a cure for each one. So, you can learn, if you don't know anything about medicine, I have liver failure, bypass, cirrhosis, seizures, AIDS, diarrhea.
Wow.
Those are all problems that I throw in there. And then the cures are just, sort of have to match. It's kind of like a matching game. You match the cure to the problem, and you have to have like if it's a GI problem, you have to have the GI doctor to do it,
right,
to cure the person.
That's pretty cool.
So you can learn a little bit about medicine without knowing anything about it. Anybody can play it. You're 10 years old, you can play this game.
Yeah, that sounds like fun. That's so cute. What a good idea. So the link for it is in your profile, right? Is it drwarsgame.com?
It's drwars.com.
drwars.com.
I have a website just about the game. So you can learn, you get a little picture of the game. There's a video that I made on my own without any help, which is, it kind of tells you the rules. That's drwars.com.
Okay.
drwars.com. The link, if you go to my Instagram, the link is in my profile. I always have it up there. drwars.com is how you link to get the game. And it's on Amazon.
And
I
Amazon.
Through Amazon.
Yeah. I was just going to say it's on Amazon too. Yeah. Because
if you look up Dr. Wars card game, it'll come up in Amazon.
Yeah. That's so cool. Oh my gosh.
I'm running out of these games though. So you better get to it. Yeah.
How do you even go about doing that? Like, how do you have a game made?
Well, I learned a lot. I mean, I've been at this for a number of years because of the board game. Board game took me a number of years. So I learned just from scratch. Right. I first had a napkin, then I had a poster, and then my wife worked at an art museum, so she knew some professional people. I met one of my nutritionists or dietitians at the hospital husband was a professional designer.
Wow.
So those two people got together, and I made the board into a professional looking board. And then, those people knew other people, and I got the box from when I did the game. I got the pieces from England. I got the box from Atlanta.
Wow.
And it's it's just research on where you get these things. How do we get the pieces? How can I make the pieces? Are they cost effective? All this stuff went into this game. I had to trademark the name Dr. Wars.
Wow.
And it's just like a learning process. It took me years to figure it out because I knew nothing about it.
Yeah.
I just I woke up one morning and the whole board game was in my head. I was just becoming a hospital. I just had gone to the hospitals full time. I was just thinking about how moving people around is like a chess game.
Mm-hmm.
And there's different hierarchies, like the king is the CEO or whatever,
Yeah.
and there's pawns that help. And then there's the patients who are like moving around. And so I just kind of thinking this in general, not thinking about a game. But I woke up one morning and the whole game was in my head. It was like I woke up, there it was, and said, what is this? What I should do something with this. So I drew it and, went from there.
Wow, that's really cool. Oh my gosh. I mean, you're very creative. I don't know if I could do that. I would be like, is there somebody I can just send this idea to and they can just make it for me?
Well, that's what that's what I'd rather do. I'd rather just create and have somebody else do the work.
Yeah.
But, nobody's going to do it. I'm like, you have to learn a lot.
Yeah, definitely. Oh my gosh, that's so cool. Wow.
I think a lot of nurses and medical people are creative, and they just need to nourish it.
Definitely.
You may not think you're creative, but you probably are, and you just don't know it. Or you got to, if you did something in high school, like you were in the band or orchestra, or you did some art, you can channel that. You can go back to it and do it.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's great advice. I mean, we are creative, doctors and nurses. I mean, everyone at the hospital, we have to be creative every single day.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, we're working without resources sometimes or low staff or whatever. I mean, we have to just make it work,
Oh, totally. I just think there's a lot of creativity in the health field, and people can channel it if they want to.
Definitely. Yeah. The coolest thing where I really saw that come out was during COVID, because people all of a sudden got really creative and really out of the box. They were making these covers for intubation, and the nurses are using the MRI extension tubing for the IVs, and and everyone was sharing everything on social media. It's pretty interesting.
It's kind of like what it might have been in the old days when people were just like frontier work. And that's really a nice insight there, that you're going off we go so much on protocols and cookbooks.
Yep.
And it's really, really exciting to be doing things just to try to help patients without worrying about the protocols.
Right. Yeah. You're so right. I mean, we're doing everything we could. We were trying everything, and nobody was really even, there was no pushback either. Like the Palm fellow would come in and say, hey, we're going to do this. Now we're going to, like I said before, we're going to put a non-rebreather over a high flow nasal cannula. And the nurses just went, okay. We never saw that before in our lives, but we're like, all right, whatever is going to work.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's crazy.
That's funny.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking of people dressed up in moon suits.
Yeah. Yeah. Did you have that type of PPE, or do you have?
No, I mean, we have PPE, but we don't have the moon suit. I call them moon suits. I referred to that in one of my cartoons, but because that's what I see in South Korea and all these other places that are dressed up like they're astronauts.
Yeah.
We don't have that. We have all I think the PPE you're supposed to have, but I'm not sure if we don't, I don't know if we're that the moon suit thing, but we have all we need. I mean, we're pretty stocked.
That's good.
I'm okay with our PPE.
Good. Yeah. Hopefully we won't go through that shortage again. I was very lucky. I didn't ever run out. I mean, New York City was rationed, definitely, but I never ran out of PPE. So I got very lucky that way.
Yeah.
It's
crazy. Gotten better than it was. It's just gotten better. I mean, I think we're learning. This is a virus nobody, it's just such a new thing, and we're all trying to find our way with this virus.
And adapt. Yeah. Do you have any predictions with COVID? What's going to happen, do you think?
Oh, I don't know. I'm not gonna.
Yeah.
I don't want to even. Everybody has their own prediction. I think it's going to take a while.
Yeah. Same. Yeah. I think it's a long game now.
Yeah, I think it's a long game. I think it's maybe, I don't know, a couple of years before we get back to normal. But I hope not. Nobody really wants to do this for very long. We're just kind of take it day by day.
I mean, what else can you do, really? Well, I really appreciate you coming on the podcast. I was really looking forward to speaking to you, and you're such a joy to have, and everyone enjoys your artwork and your creativity, and please, let's do this again. I would love to talk to you again.
Yeah, I'd love to do it again.
Yeah, we could do like like I was saying before, we could do an hour on every one of these. I mean, you're in so many different places and you're working with nurses. I mean, anytime you want to come back, we can dive into this more.
I'd love to do it. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much for everything.
Thanks, Abby.
All right.
Take care.
All right. Take care. Thank you guys so much for listening to this show. We really appreciate it. If you have any questions or comments, any topics you'd like to submit, please send them to rnmdpodcast@gmail.com. You can also send them to our Instagram account, which is RNMDPodcast, or my personal Instagram account is The Nocturnal Nurse. If you like the show, please subscribe. We need the love right now. We're just getting started. Bear with us while we figure out the audio and the editing. It's a work in progress. Dan and I are both working full time while we're trying to navigate this new project that we're working on. So also, if you have any suggestions of how we can make this better, this is for you guys. Sometimes we do interviews, sometimes we do medical topics, sometimes we do, myth busters kind of things, like we did in the UTI episode. Let us know what works for you. Like, subscribe, and we'll see you again next week. Bye-bye.